Right, I'm on the hotline today to Australia to Ben Krahe. Thanks very much for agreeing to talk to us today, Ben.
No worries.
First
Good
of
to
all,
meet you, Simon.
yeah, you too. Basically, can you tell us what you do for a living?
Well, right now I punt for a living. Basically, most of my stuff is on harness racing, which is probably not so big in obviously in England. I think they have it in Ireland or something like that over there, but it's quite big in Europe, obviously. But commonly known as the Trots in Australia. And I do quite a bit on Greyhounds as well, and then probably 10% just on some other sort of trading sport and whatever else. But basically my focus has always been Trots, and that's my specialty, and I'm getting right into the Greyhound racing as well at the moment.
Okay, so we'll talk a bit more about the intricacies of trotting and stuff in a bit, but we'll go back to a bit of your background. Your first involvement punting, I assume, was as a punter, was it?
My first involvement punting was probably 9 months before I was born, conceived at Harold Park Trots one Friday night, I imagine, when Dad got the trifecta, something like that. But seriously, I've been going to the track, ever since I was a kid. Dad was a hobbyist greyhound trainer, loved going to the trots and the races, and at least twice or three times a week I'd be going to the track with them. So brought up on it, obviously punting as a kid and whatever else. All sort of till probably near enough to 20 years ago, when I'd sort of decided to sort of try and make it a bit professionally and become a bookmaker.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you decided to do your business on the other side of the fence as a bookie. So what was life like as a Greyhound bookmaker?
Well, I was sick of losing just as a punter, and I always saw the bookmakers driving around in Porsches and whatever else, and thought I'll give that a go. So I had a mentor that taught me how to do it. I was always very good at maths, etc. And basically the cheapest license you can get in Australia is to become a Greyhound bookmaker. So that's why I decided to do that, even though Trots was probably my passion. And I started out 3 days a week in country New South Wales at tracks like Cessnock, Singleton, Wauchope, 3-4 hour drive to get there. But it was sort of right at the end of, I guess, the halcyon days of bookmaking. There was only probably a couple of hundred people on track, and the tracks I went to, I was pretty much the only bookmaker on track. So it was a quick, you needed to learn quick, basically.
Yeah, were there plenty of punters that used to take your pants down?
Oh, look, it wasn't too bad. There was probably, 5 or 6 guys that you'd have to worry about. The rest was sort of all just your trainers having their $10 and $20 on stuff. But there was obviously, smarts around in that day and age, and you got to know them pretty quickly. Yeah.
So were you an opinionated bookmaker? Did you do your homework, or did you just bet to figures?
No, I did the form beforehand and rocked up on the track, and yeah, as I said, 95% of the time I was the only bookie on track. There was probably, because it was just, wasn't happening anymore like it used to be at sort of the start of corporates coming in, I guess, very, very early stage and stuff like that. So most of the time I just did my own form, and then one day a week I actually went to one of the Greyhound tracks, but fielded on the gallops on a Saturday. So the major races at Randwick or Flemington or something like that. And basically I just got the prices off one of the professionals on that was giving them out on the day, and I sort of started with that as my prices, then just made a book, which is completely different to how it works these days.
So you were the only bookie on the track, but you still had to turn it in. Was it that bad in the end?
Yeah, look, we were, we might have held $600-700 a race, I guess. So by the time you're putting the time in, paying your fees and paying someone to come with you, it wasn't that we were losing money, but I wasn't making money. And 2 years of doing that was really good introduction onto that side of the fence. And like I said, it wasn't that we were losing money, but we just weren't making enough money. And I didn't have enough money behind me to go to the next level, to go to the races or something like that as a bookmaker. So that's when I decided to approach one of the biggest bookmakers in Australia, Alan Scander, and ask him for a job.
Was that on course or off course?
No, that was off course in Darwin, and his company. He was just starting a new company up, and I saw it advertised. He was in Melbourne. I lived in Sydney, which I don't know if you know, to the intricacies of Australia, but that's a good 12-hour drive or an hour flight away.
I've done it.
And yeah, and he was starting a business up in Darwin called Betstar, and they were looking for people, and I put my resume in and gave him a bit of a background, and he said, well, hopefully we can get to meet one day. And I said, well, how about I fly down tomorrow? And he was that impressed that I actually came down that day to see him, that he gave me a job. And 6 weeks or 2 months later or something like that, I was the first person in his Darwin office.
So how eye-opening was that sort of business to you?
Look, that was that was incredible. He was one of the biggest bookmakers in Australia at the time, and I'd never seen or even believed such figures could go churning through an office. And we grew from 3 or 4 people in that office to 30 or 40 staff pretty quickly. And I learnt a great deal there about the way he bookmaked, completely different to the only way I knew, which was my way. And I think I was there for probably, 2 or 3, maybe 3 years in Darwin. Learning off one of the best.
So what would his game have been? Would he stand horses for colossal amounts of money, or would he try and make a book?
I think he was one of the he was actually one of the innovators of what happens now in the fact that you just played heads. Obviously there was guys doing form in there and whatever else, but it was a let's play heads type of game. He'd have a sort of a limit to stand things for, but if a bloke was doing his money on the day, he always gave that guy a chance to get out, basically. So he would play heads, So and back then everyone was actually bookmaking still then, and we were still doing that to an extent, but we still did play heads. So if someone was losing, he would stand the next bet from that person for a little bit more than possibly usual. So I think he was one of the first people to actually do that.
Was learning how people punt quite a good grounding for becoming a punter yourself, a successful punter?
Oh yeah, look, I thought I knew everything as a pickle punter, and then I learnt other things on the bookmaking side when I went there myself, and then I went to Allen, and then I worked for another couple of bookmakers after that, and I just took a lot of everything from everyone, and I'm still learning, But basically. The staff that I work with there were all very good, and they knew little things. And then I'd talk to people that were clients, or I'd sort of understand how they bet and on the other side of things. And a lot of everything like that has helped me get where I am today.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning about your passion is harness racing. So you landed the plum job with Bet365, who are a familiar name over here as well, 2013. So tell us a bit about harness racing, the nuances of it, and why you love it so much.
Why do I love it? I was probably brought up on it. I think it's the most exciting sport to watch, the racing code to watch live. Probably not so much now with the tracks where they are, but back when I was brought up at a place called Harold Park in Sydney, which was the main track, it was right on top of the track. They do sort of 2 or 3 laps for a race, and it was exciting. It was at night time. It was in the middle of the city. It was just really exciting sort of sport to watch, I think. And I think once it's in your blood, it's something that sort of stays there forever.
One of the bookmakers I've interviewed from the UK, that there is sort of trotting, but it's sort of held at a very amateur sort of level in fields and things like that. And they used to put the trotting on from France and places like that if the weather was bad before the all-weather racing. And what used to perplex the punters was the horse that they backed in front was disqualified for running.
For galloping. For galloping. Yeah, well, that happens still in Europe. We have a little bit different rules here. We have like a relegation rule, or a horse can protest if another horse gallops. But basically, if they're out of their gate, because they are actually, there's 2 different kinds. They are pacers or they are trotters. So there's 2 different kinds of events there. But yeah, you can be disqualified if you don't do the correct gate. That's correct.
Okay. Now, how big is the punting market on the trots compared to, say, the horse racing or greyhounds,
Terrible.
etc.?
It's terrible. The way that the market is at the moment in Australia, it is really bad, and it is really hard to get on. I'm not the biggest punter in the world. I'm, just medium-sized punter. I'm obviously bigger than just your regular Joe on a Saturday, but I'm nowhere near the biggest punter in the world, and I struggle to get on. There are rules coming into Australia now for minimum bet laws, which do help, which means you can get on to win $500 at a company after a certain time of the day. But that really doesn't sort of assist us when the odds go up a day or two before and the prizes are gone anyway by the time we are actually allowed to bet. So at the moment, there are probably 5 companies that will bet me before the minimum laws kick in to win $500. The tab's probably a little bit more. But basically, we have to wait until these times kick in, and it's just becoming harder and harder. And that's not that I really want to become a much more larger scale punter, but I really don't have the option to anyway in that field. So Trots is probably 5% of the market of the whole of the gambling market in Australia, if that.
Okay, so you decided to go pro punting in 2014, so you stood the test of time. Yes. Did you spot, when you were working with bookmakers, did you spot a niche or an edge which made you decide to take what is quite a big plunge?
No, I worked for Scanders, and then I worked for another couple of companies, and 365 was the last company I worked for. I was there for a year with them before they actually started in Australia, and about a week before they opened, I cracked the shits at the boss and left, and my wife said, don't worry about it. I was on a very good salary there, and she said, don't worry about it. We're not here to go and work for someone you don't want to work for. And I basically just left and started. And, I didn't make enough money the first year, the second year, or the third year, but every year I've been getting better and better at what I do. And enough that the last sort of 2 or 3 years, I haven't had to do any other sort of work. So when I left, I started my own tipping company and did some consulting work for Betfair. And I still do a little bit for Betfair as well, and for some other bookmakers and whatever else. But currently now, for the last 2 or 3 years, I'd be comfortable enough that I wouldn't have to do any other paid work. So it has taken a long time to get to where I am, and a lot of fine tuning, and I'm still tuning and working out how to do stuff. I still like to talk to people and learn different things, because the minute you stop learning, I think you're full of it here. You got to keep learning. So yeah.